lay it out. Lay out this book for us in a nutshell, how you got on this story and what you found.
Sure. Well, our book really goes a lot deeper and a lot broader than we were able to do even in all the many stories we wrote for the AP. What we really focused on is how, in the aftermath of 9/11, about how the NYPD, working hand in hand with the CIA, built an intelligence apparatus that focuses on American citizens like no other police department in the country. This active duty CIA officer and a retired CIA officer built an apparatus by which, this sort of army of informants is out there, and we have these demographics officers who their job is just hang out in neighborhoods and listen for what people are talking about. Some of what we've seen in these files, it's a file that says, we saw two men speaking at a cafe, and they were talking about what they thought about the President's State of the Union address. And here's what they thought. What do they think about drones? What do they think about foreign policy? What do they think about American policies toward civil liberties? TSA, are we too discriminatory against Muslims? I mean, all this stuff ends up in police files, and their justification is, well, we need to know what the sentiment of these communities are, so we can look for hot spots.
Adam, talk to us about how this plays out. So you have NYPD Commissioner Ray Kelly working with David Cohen from the CIA, and they set out to create basically a map of all of New York's ethnic neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's what the demographics unit was doing. They wanted to literally map the human terrain of the 5 boroughs of New York. And they went beyond, too. They went into Newark, and they went into other places as well, Newark, New Jersey. And so they had this fear after 9/11. And they looked out into the Queens and Brooklyn, these other places where there were a lot of Muslim Americans, and thought, we don't know much about these communities. And they looked as an example, people like Muhammad Atta, who was one of 9/11 hijackers. And Muhammad Atta had radicalized, he had grown more religious, and he had given off these signals in front of the community. And they wanted to be in the communities in New York. So if there was anybody like Muhammad Atta, in fact, anybody who was radicalizing, they would have listening posts. They would have eyes and ears in the community to pick up on that.
One of the things you write about is how, though, the undercover officers would go to the best Arab food restaurants, not coming up with leads, but because the food was good, and just, quote, spy there.
Right. We found while reporting the book that these plainclothes officers working with the demographics unit were gravitating toward the better restaurants. There's a bakery, the Damascus Bakery in Brooklyn, that serves excellent pastries. And there's the Kabul Kebab. There's a kebab house in Flushing, Queens that serves excellent kebab. And what the commanding officer in charge of the demographics unit started to see was there were many reports being filed from similar locations. And how do you spend $40 at the pastry shop? And so eventually he determined that they were going there, filing these reports simply because the food was good.
Matt Apuzzo, talk about the main players here. Talk about Larry Sanchez. Talk about David Cohen, who come from the CIA and went to the NYPD.
Sure. So Ray Kelly comes on board as police commissioner after 9/11 and says, look, we can't rely solely on the federal government. And I think really smartly said, we can't do business as usual. We need to start developing our own intelligence and have a better sense of what's going on in the city. So the guy he hired to do that is a man named Dave Cohen, who we profile really deeply in the book, who made his career at the CIA, rose to the level of the deputy director for operations, basically a nation's top spy. So he retired as the head of the clandestine service, and he was basically recruited out of retirement to start what is basically a mini CIA at the NYPD. And one of Cohen's first things is he then calls down to the CIA and says, hey, I need an active duty guy who can be kind of my right-hand man. And George Tenet, the director of the CIA, sends Larry Sanchez to New York. And Larry is this very likable guy, skydiver, scuba diver, guy's guy, and he's active duty. So he's got a blue CIA badge, so he can start the early morning at the CIA station in New York, and then kind of go over to NYPD. And he's directing domestic operations for NYPD. I mean, he's telling officers how to do collection or where to focus their efforts. And he really was the architect of the demographics unit. So this guy, active duty for the CIA, was really the the intellectual father of the demographics unit.